Hi, this is Sarah with Reclaim Creatives, and we're going to make a cowboy hat. So here are two hats I've made with this pattern. They both have lining as well. For this project I'm using foam-backed toolbox vinyl. This material has a natural curve. And there's one more look at the pattern I'm using. Then you cut out the pieces and they look something like this. I'm going to join these two pieces on the sewing machine like that. So we are going to use joining stitch number 16. Okay, that takes J, which is already on the machine. And then we are gonna give it a go. And you want to keep your seam at the center point of the foot. It looks like my bobbin ran out of thread when I was stitching. But you can see okay, I'm replacing the bobbin here. Drag the string around that little track and it cuts off. And put the little cover on there. Okay, going back to finish what we started. Keeping the seam in the center of the presser foot. And just hold each side with both hands as it goes through the machine. Tell it we're ending. And needle up. And you'll end up with something like that. Make sure you've marked the center of the crown top like this with a marker. Now you're going to line up the top center of your crown like this with the top of the band of the crown, face to face. And then you're going to start stitching. Turning your crown top as you go along, lining up the two pieces. Make sure you're going slow enough and paying attention to what you're doing so you don't have to reset your position like I just had to. Let it know you want to end just before the center. Maybe a quarter of an inch before the center you want to stop. back side, that is. You want to leave enough room to stitch this to the corresponding guy like that. And then you'll tidy up that corner later. So you've got something that looks about like that now. You've got to stitch this other side. I'm going to go ahead and stitch the back of the crown before I finish the top. Just with the same straight stitch. Then we position it something like this. And then what we're going to do is pinch this down and run it through the machine and finish this curve like this. And go as slow as you need to so you don't mess up the track. Your track, your trail. So you end up with something about like this. My seams aren't perfect. You can see they're a little all over the place. You could do better, for sure. At this point, if you're going to use a liner in your hat, go ahead and trace the liner for the brim. Only cut out the outer circle for now. Then go ahead and pin it in place. So we're going to use overcasting stitch number 7. We've already put the overcasting presser foot with the little guide on the machine, and we're going to put the foot down, make sure that the edge of the fabric is pressed up against the guide. And then we're just going to start stitching. All the way around. Just keep it against that guide. You see how that's turning out? Pretty straightforward. So then it ends up something like this. You see my stitches aren't perfect, but I did it anyway. Just keep going. You're gonna mess up sometimes. Just keep going. So we've rolled the brim somewhat to get the edge of the inside of the brim up against that guide. And then we're just gonna keep going with the same overcast stitch, using the same overcasting presser foot. So then your work will look something like that, and you can go ahead and remove these pins. You can see that my stitching wasn't perfect on this one either, but it serves its purpose. Then we're left with these two pieces. This will turn inside out. You'll have to kind of force it, manhandle it a little. And I say careful not to break any stitches, but it doesn't feel like you can be careful when you're doing this. But just do the best that you can. So I'm still working on it. I'm just pressing outward on the seam from underneath. The straighter you stitched it, the cleaner it's gonna look in the end. And you can always turn it inside out again and restitch any kind of problem areas. Like this looks a little off. So I think I'm going to tighten up my seams a little. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a straight stitch and try to stitch it straighter further down the line here. And this just needs to be gone across as evenly as possible. And once you inside out it again, make it right side out. I think we fixed our seam somewhat. And that's what it looks like on the inside. And we're going to take this guy and this guy and kind of put them together. So here are a couple of hats I've made in the past. This one basically uses the same design except an inch shorter on the crown, but that wasn't deep enough. So that's basically flat there. And in this style, and you can see that's actually curved. I've cut a curve into it and it helps the hat keep its shape a little better. So what I think I might do now is I might squish this flat somewhat, even up the sides, and then cut a curve into it because I like the way that that helps the hat retain its shape. So I've cut it something like that. We'll see how it does. Next we'll attach the brim to the crown. So I put a mark top and bottom or front and back where the center is if you fold it in half. And I'm going to line those up to these when I stitch them together. You can, when you cut this center part out, leave about that much around the edges, maybe, I don't know, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and then cut little tabs. It'll help you attach until you get more confident. So I didn't put tabs this time, first time without tabs, but we're gonna go for it. We are going to use joining stitch number 16. 16, which means we have to switch back to the J presser foot. Just to give you an idea of what you're looking at, you want to set this over the top. Try to match up your little lines with the center of the crown. And pull it down until you like your shape. Well, if we're gonna put the liner inside the hat, we probably need to do it now. So let's go ahead and cut those pieces and get that started. So now we've created our pattern for the lining, which is very similar to the pattern for the hat itself, but this width is a little bit wider, which makes the crown a little bit taller. So we'll fold this part of the inner lining under, and it'll create a nice band for the hat. And for the top, we use the piece that we cut out from the brim earlier. Now we've got these 3 pieces, and we'll begin making the inner lining for the hat. So now we're going to stitch these 3 together the same way we stitched this guy together. So you match these 2 pieces up together side by side, grab one edge, and feed it through using a straight stitch. Notice I only did one side. I left the other side open because it's easier to attach the circle with that one side open. So I've marked the top and bottom of the circle again. So now I've opened up the seam that we just sewed, and I'm matching up the center mark on the top of my crown to the sides of the crown for the inner lining. And we're just going to use a straight stitch again. And just follow it all the way around. There's halfway stitched in place, and then we'll just continue around and do the other half. So after stitching that guy up, you end up with something like this. And you want to turn that inside out as well. And check all your seams and make sure you don't need to redo it. To put the 2 together, you want the seams of your liner to be facing outward like this, and you want your seams of your crown to be right side out. And you're going to go like that. Flip it over, line it up the best you can, right here. And then just flip it all over the edge. It might take a little work, but you can get it. With the lining edge folded over like this, we're going to go and stitch it right through there. Now, it'll probably help to take this little guy off so that you can slip the inside of your hat over. So for this one, I'm going to use stitch number 12 here. It looks a lot like a blanket stitch, kind of like 11 but facing the other way. And then it's the same J presser foot like we've been using. You can hear the needle popping through the foam. And you just want to keep going like that all the way around. You can see where my speed varied when I was stitching. Practice makes perfect. That's one side. I went around it with that stitch several times to give it an illusion of texture. Feel free to put this on top of your head at any point and make sure that it's the right dimension for your head, because you may need to adapt the pattern according to the size of your head. So we're going to work on attaching those two in a similar method as we attached the liner. So we're going to use joining stitch 16, presser foot J, which is already on the machine. And then we're gonna match up our little marks. Centered, and run it through the machine. So my little mark, my halfway mark, is lined up with the middle front of the crown. And we're gonna push it through there using a joinery stitch and join the pieces together in that way. And we are using number 16 right now. So you'll have to manipulate the brim of your hat, the foam vinyl, to where it's pressing against the crown of the hat. So half of your stitches are going on one part and half of your stitches are going on the other. And you don't have to use a joinery stitch like I'm using. You could use a zigzag stitch. Whatever your machine is capable of and whatever you feel comfortable with it. And you might need to go back around a time or two, depending on how badly you missed some parts of it. But we'll review it. And that's what you end up with after you go around a few times. Just make sure there's no light shining through all your seams. It's all attached. It's got a decent shape.